Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Paulina Flores, and I have the honor of serving as the Executive Director for Self-Help Graphics and Art. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional and ancestral and unceded territory of the Tongva, Quiche, Tataviam, and Chumash peoples, who are the original stewards of this land. We honor their enduring presence, their deep and sacred connection to this place, and the many indigenous peoples who continue to live, work, and thrive in Los Angeles today. Thank you to Tamika and the Los Angeles Public Library for opening this beautiful space to us tonight. There is something fitting about gathering in a library, a place built on the belief that culture belongs to everyone, to talk about an art form born of exactly that same belief. For more than 50 years, Self-Help Graphics and Art has been a home for printmaking on the East Side. We grew out of the Chicano movement when printmaking became a tool to tell our stories, to protest, to remember, and to imagine something better. 5 decades later, that work has not slowed down. Our artists are still making prints that respond to the moment we are living in. This is why tonight is so meaningful. The works that we will discuss tonight are part of the exhibition America Today, Voices in Contemporary Print, on view right now at the Print Center in Philadelphia. I was there for the opening, and I can tell you that there is something very powerful about seeing our artists work on that wall, in that city, and in that company. The exhibition brings together 6 of the country's leading print shops to reflect on the state of American democracy as the nation marks 250th years. To have Self-Help Graphics on that national stage in that conversation alongside our artists from right here in Los Angeles is something that we are deeply proud of. So I will keep my remarks short because the people that you really want to hear from are here on this stage. Tonight's conversation will be moderated by Lauren Rosenblum. Lauren is the Jensen Bryan Curator at the Print Center in Philadelphia and a PhD candidate in art history at the Graduate Center at the City University of New York. In both roles, she advances the study and display of modern and contemporary printmaking. In dialogue with her tonight is our own artist and printmaker, Dewey Tafoya, Consuelo Flores, and Alvaro Marquez. Dewey is a visual artist and screen printer. He has been a member of the Self-Help Graphics community for over 2 decades and is currently our lead printer and assistant director of the Professional Printmaking Program. Consuelo Flores is a playwright, poet, visual artist, and prolific altarista who has made Day of the Dead celebrations of life for prominent cultural centers, museums, and universities throughout the U.S. And her play, Soul Sacrifice, is currently on view at Casa 101, a very powerful play. Alvaro Marquez addresses social, racial, and gender inequality in print, drawing, sculpture, and installation. He is interested in the history of displacement in the Americas, starting with the dispossession of indigenous people during European conquest through contemporary issues such as homelessness. Please join me in welcoming them tonight.
My name is Lauren. It's very nice to be with you all and with you all this evening. I want to start by thanking Paulina and Dewey and Gabby, as well as the additional staff members at Self-Help Graphics who have been generous partners in an exhibition project, America Today, based in Philadelphia, that now has such long arms uniting us here this evening. I'm going to start with a few words about the show and the Print Center, and then we'll turn right over to talking about beautiful work on view. About a year and a half ago, in January 2025, I first connected with the folks at Self-Help, already envisioning a project to take place during the semi-quincentennial, the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. I was unsure of their familiarity with the Print Center, a very small nonprofit gallery in Philadelphia that, since 1915, has been dedicated to practicing artists, primarily working in print, and, since the 1960s, in photography as well. It was a relief that I was immediately met with enthusiasm. And in that interim, I was able to collaborate with the folks in the studio to think about the significance of this exhibition, and the relevance and the immediate relevance of the work that they have been producing over many, many decades. America Today, Voices in Contemporary Print, opened on April 24th, and as Paulina mentioned, it was wonderful to have visitors from not just self-help, but from around the United States joining us for a very celebratory evening. And the show runs through July 25th. Should any of you find yourself in Philadelphia, just send me an email. And as Paulina started to explain, the show really focuses on the fact that exhibiting artists have turned to printmaking to amplify their voices and engage directly with issues that shape American society for a very long time, committed to expressing political ideals and urgent societal concerns. And in this show, taken all together, they visualize collective experience, as well as historical reappraisals and imaginative futures. The exhibition's organized thematically. There's the Print Center. We're in our historic 19th century carriage house, a small street off of the popular Rittenhouse neighborhood. You can see we're a tiny building, but a mighty organization of five people. And this is a beautiful photograph. In between exhibitions, we'll put a Philadelphia artist's work on view. And this is an amazing photographer, Gerald Cyrus. And here's just 2 installation shots of the exhibition. We have 3 galleries total, and each one looks a little bit different. As I was saying, the exhibition is organized thematically, divided into sections addressing politicized lives, spaces for solidarity, ancestral guidance, and futurist visions. Individual prints reference community histories, social action, systemic violence, and cultural heritage. And as Paulina also mentioned, the exhibition draws from 6 community-centered, mission-based print shops across the U.S. In addition to self-help, they include Brandywine Workshop in Philadelphia, Coronado Print Studio in Austin, Texas, Crow's Shadow Institute of the Arts in Pendleton, Oregon, Robert Blackburn Printmaking Workshop in New York, and Women's Studio Workshop in Kingston, New York. These 6 printmaking workshops are not only sites of creation, but also vital gathering places. They are unique among all those in the United States, as they are expressly committed to building communities, both locally and beyond. Further, they support artists as outspoken advocates for their own lived experience, and that in turn speaks directly to the breadth of American experience. I'm so honored and grateful to be sitting alongside Consuelo, Alvaro, and Dewey to reflect upon artistic practice, the core themes of the exhibition, as I've talked about them already, and the vital work of self-help. So thank you for having me here. And so we'll start this evening with short presentations or discussions by each of the artists on their work that's being exhibited in the show, a reflection on the kind of core imagery, the themes, the messages, and the significance of those works to you as their makers. Let's see. And you can see just a quick moment before we turn forward. The exhibition, like I said, it was drawn from 6 printmaking workshops. And what's, I think, very special about this exhibition is it unites the work together. It intermixes the voices of people from around the United States who are deeply committed to the same issues, but how they impact their own individual lives. And it shows both resonance, similarity, and then difference, as well as the kind of differences that we each confront with the injustices and the joys that affect us immediately within our lives and in our communities. All right, Consuelo.
So this piece is called Monarchs and Migration, Children at the Border of Freedom. And the main image is, so I was asked what I wanted people to take away from this image. And initially, I want people to look at the image and think, oh, this is a beautiful image. It has sunflowers, and it's colorful, and it's pretty. And then I want people to look at it more carefully. And the central figure, or the main figure, is the torch from the Statue of Liberty. And it is surrounded by and sort of there are butterflies coming out of the torch along with the flames. This was a central piece for my Day of the Dead community altar last year. And monarchs are twofold in this particular piece. Monarchs are migratory, so they have no borders. And monarchs are also a very iconic image for the Day of the Dead because it has 3 different stages of life. And that is sort of emblematic of the Day of the Dead. But also, it's facing City Hall, which is, in this case, facing government. And around the whole torch is the poem, the Colossus poem that is at the base of the Statue of Liberty, which is, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore, bring these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me." And I felt that was very relevant. In the background, you will see the faces of children who were at the border of freedom. All of those children are dead. And they died from very curable illness, from flus or infection that was not treated. And so they were at the border of freedom, and it was literally snatched from them. And they died unnecessarily. It was basically, for me, it was an atrocity that was allowed to happen. And it is also the Statue of Liberty torch is sitting on sunflowers. Sunflowers are the flower of the Native American people. And in essence, the Statue of Liberty is sitting on Native American land. So my point of having that there is that unless you are Native American or you were enslaved and brought to this land, everyone else is an immigrant. So that is the symbology behind this piece.
We'll come back to this image later on.
So good evening, everybody. My name is Alvaro. This piece here was made about, I want to say, almost 6 years ago in 2020, and it's got an interesting story. I consider myself a research-based artist. I dive into archives, and then the archive takes me to the object that I'm going to make. And in this particular case, I've been working with maps for over a decade now, and I went into the archives at Cal State Dominguez Hills to look at old maps of the South Bay. At the time, I was living in the city of Gardena in the South Bay, and Cal State Dominguez Hills has an archive of maps of the region. And I'm a big history nerd. I was trained as a historian. That's my undergrad degree. That was part of my graduate training before going to art school. And I found this map that had a very horrible racist place name that I don't dare repeat on this stage. And I thought, what if I were to take this map that has this, like, really, it's showing how racism is embedded into the landscape. What if I were to remix it and to do something different with it? And so at the time I was in art school getting my MFA in printmaking, and I was experimenting, and I got the invitation from Self-Help to do this project. And interestingly enough, I didn't follow the directions. When I was asked to do this print, it was supposed to be for the census. And I interpreted that very liberally. And because I have my own set of politics, I said, I'm going to make a statement. And as a result of that, it ended up not being used for the campaign. because the cop cars, are a critique of the police. And understandably, the leaders of self-help at the time didn't want to offend the funder, who now is my employer, interestingly enough. So it would have been me making that decision. And what I decided to reflect on is sort of this paradox of unhoused people in LA, where they're, on the one hand, they're tents at the time. If you remember 5 or 6 years ago, if you drive across LA, there's unhoused people in tents across the landscape. Anywhere you turn, there's people living on tents. And I found that very troubling, how unhoused people are hyper visible in that regard. But when it comes to the census, they're invisible. Nobody's knocking on their tents. Nobody's counting them as residents. They don't exist in the state apparatus in that regard. So I wanted to kind of reflect on that invisibility and the hypervisibility, and make references to the fact that traditionally, even when the police department was first started here in Los Angeles, they were policing indigenous people and vagrants who were on the street. So the police have a long history of policing public space and who has access to it. And as somebody who's really interested in the long-term effects of colonialism, I wanted to include that reference to the Spanish galleon, because in my politics and in my understanding, if you want to understand gentrification and homelessness, really the root of it is a colonial encounter, because the Europeans are the ones who brought notions of private property and turned land into a commodity for real estate speculation. So I wanted to sort of make these visual iconographic references to how these things are interrelated. And oftentimes in my work, I work through juxtaposition so that people can kind of make these associations. And I wanted to put it on that landscape. All the shapes from the map are directly brought forward from the archival map that I found at Cal State Dominguez Hills.
Thank you for the lovely and insightful introductions into just one facet of each of your work. I wonder if we could take this moment to kind of draw out some of the things you've already started to talk about, was the central role that social justice plays. And while I know that runs deep in all aspects, we're going to really just focus on this. And Alvaro, you've started us off. If maybe you could just start by kind of elaborating the intersection of where that takes place and how that kind of unfolds in working on a print project, and then we'll kind of turn to how does the medium specificity of printmaking help you unravel one aspect of your commitments to social justice?
I mean, I'm not from LA, but I've been here 18 years. So like this summer, I'll have been here as long as I was in my hometown. I'm from a little farm town up north called Salinas, California. I was really shaped in the history of the Chicano tradition. All of my educators, my mentors, the people who raised me in my community had been activists and organizers in the 70s. By the time I was in elementary school in the 80s and high school in the 90s, I grew up in that milieu where like Chicanismo was what gave us a sense of representation, of agency. California is thought of as this liberal bastion, but I remember Pete Wilson. I remember Prop 187. That is the context in which I grew up. That's the California that I grew up in. So that's where I was politicized, understanding that I come from 3 generations of farm workers. I can't avoid but to be political because my whole existence has been at the margins of society. I'm now privileged because of my college education and my job, but that political formation is really fundamental to me. So I cannot make artwork that is not political. I mean, I would say all art is political regardless. Some is just more explicit than others. And so that is at the root of pretty much everything that I make. I can't avoid but to think about politics, power, race, class, gender. And one of the things that I'm drawn to in printmaking is that it has a 500-year political history, right? Like I'm a history nerd. I used to teach classes on the history of print and drawing. Going back to Europe, I mean, print has been central to political critique, and because it's reproducible, it's been used to disseminate information in ways that traditional fine art doesn't really operate in. And so I think that for me, when I work in that printmaking tradition, I feel like I'm part of this 500-year legacy. And once I was connected to self-help, and self-help being so central to the development of a Chicana, Chicano, Chicanx art identity, it was like a natural extension of of those politics, and to enact them in a place that I knew was going to honor them.
Consuelo, please do chime in.
So for me, one of the things that really influenced me in terms of printmaking, even though this is my first print, I was involved with self-help graphics. I actually was really thinking about it the other day. I think it's been 45 years that I started at self-help, and I met Sister Karen. And Sister Karen, for those of you who did not know her, Sister Karen was very much, she was a rowdy nun. She was rowdy in every which way you could think of. And one of the ways was she believed that Chicano art should be reproduced and mass reproduced, like massively everywhere and it started with her. She opened her first printmaking workshop for the Chicano community in East Los Angeles in her garage. It was her backyard. She really believed that Chicano art needed to be disseminated near and far. And so I was working with her starting in 1981. And I never stopped working with self-help. That this is my first print was just because of Dewey. And Dewey was the one who reached out, and Paulina, because I think Dewey was the one who said, Consuela's been around for a while. Let's give her an opportunity. And I appreciate that, because a lot of the women during my generation in the 80s as artists were not given as many opportunities. And there were only a handful that kept going back or kept getting those opportunities, but not very many others. How I got politicized and why I became an advocate for social justice was I was a child of the 60s. And I grew up when people were getting killed easily, just like they are now, but it was a little bit more shocking at that time for the Chicano community. Vietnam was, it was just always sending the Chicanos, Puerto Ricanos, and blacks to the front lines first. And yet it was a very disproportionate number of soldiers, Latino and black soldiers, going into war, but coming back either severely wounded or in body bags. That's where that was my experience. My brother came back, but my brother came back completely different. In the meantime, I had brothers who were politically active, pushing back against the war machine, and so I followed suit. There was no way I could not be political, being the last of 10 children and being exposed to all of the different variations of discrimination from my parents down to me, where they anglicized my name because either they didn't want to, we'll just call you Connie. And I became Connie for the longest time. And I hate that name.
Can you share with us, for those perhaps who are a little less familiar, what the political milieu was like specifically at Self-Help?
At Self-Help, well, there were musicians that Los Illegals. I don't know if anybody here knows Los Illegals, but they were very political in all of their songs. So there were musicians, there were writers. Luis Rodriguez, does anybody know Luis Rodriguez? Manasar Gamboa, They were poets and writers who had their offices down below. There were printmakers that were there all the time. Barbara Carrasco, who did all of the UFW farm worker posters, not all of them, but a lot of them. She was more known than any of the other artists for doing that. Gosh, the ASCO, which is a performance art group, lots of different types of artists were coming in and out. And Sister Karen would have people come in smoking a cigarette, drinking Presidente out of a coffee cup, and everybody would be talking about what we can do to advance printmaking, advance art, Chicano art, and advance in Chicano art, but not just visual, all types. She was very much a supporter of the Chicano art community.
Thank you. Why don't we then now look at this image? You were saying it's your first print, so tell us a little bit, and Dewey, feel free, to talk about what it meant to take years of your own commitments, the context that you were working in here collaboratively, and tell us a little bit about translating your thinking and your commitment.
So I believe it was in June of 2025, right, that Marbella? So in June of 2025, Marbella reached out to me and invited me to not only do the print for this year, but also to curate this year's Day of the Dead. And I immediately, of course, tell me that something's going to happen, and I immediately start planning it. And so I told my husband I'm going to design an altar for Gloria Molina Grand Park, the community altar, and I know exactly what I want, and I need to just build it and build it and build it and make it as spectacular as I could, because I was going to take photographs of that, having talked to Dewey, knowing that I could do a photo print, a silkscreen print based on a photo. And that's what I did. And so I knew that the altar was going to address the immigrant experience, because I had selected the theme for the Day of the Dead last year. And I also knew that it needed to resonate. It needed to look like the altar, but it needed to resonate as a flat piece, not a three-dimensional. And I needed to include, there were other immigrants on the altar who had died, immigrants who had died in ICE custody, alongside immigrants who were high profile, either in literature or science or any number of different areas of life that are all important. But the ones that I really wanted to focus on for this print were the children, because the potential and the atrocity side by side was part of that social injustice that I needed to address. I really felt compelled to address that.
Yeah, and I feel like, just to kind of circle back a little bit, this print is an official Dia de los Muertos commemorative print. Self-Help Graphics, we kind of tend to do them a year in advance.
Yes.
And typically these prints kind of live on their own as Day of the Dead prints, but this one, I feel like things kind of came together with Lauren and the Print Center. And then for me, it was thinking about, how do we elevate these prints, or how do we show them somewhere else that's other than Day of the Dead? Because then it becomes kind of a niche kind of. So definitely having opportunities, especially something like this that was really important, especially very contemporary, very kind of what's happening now. How do we get it shown somewhere so that folks can see it? So definitely thinking about opportunities when the Print Center came up, it was like, can we also show this as something apart from Day of the Dead, and does it have a life as a print? And it does, and it's really important to kind of get these prints shown, like Alvaro's print, like the Census print. It's really important, and it talks about really important things, and you shouldn't be worried about like how it affects people. I think we're not here to censor; we're here to make the things. And inherently, that's where all the social justice ideas come in, where it's just kind of like we wanted to say something about what's happening, and that's kind of the lives that we have lived.
Dewey, can you talk about, from your side, what it was like to, and then we'll do the same for, can you talk about what you think you were able to do with Consuelo, what you were able to kind of draw out or put in?
Yeah, I think Consuelo just talked about, she had a whole idea. So I think for me, cool, as long as you have an idea, because a lot of times artists will come without any of an idea. So I think it was pretty much, Consuelo was going to build an altar, take a photo of it, and we were going to use the photos to kind of create a print. So I remember when you came with some of the photos, and it had a very gray LA sky, kind of like how it looks today, and it was kind of like, how can we make it look better? But also kind of talking about the idea of altars, and altars having images and pictures, which were kind of not in the photo, but it was also like, how do we kind of bump it up so that we have that? So then having a conversation with Consuelo, and then just thinking about how we can kind of highlight the kids on there and have them on there, but also have it, like you said, like really bright and inviting. These prints are I feel like Day of the Dead prints are heavy, and definitely spending time with them, with the artists, with the artists, you hear the stories, and it becomes heavy, and we see those kids every day, and it's kind of like, how do we work through it? So definitely, technically, kind of going over it with Consuelo, who's not a printmaker, and just being like, okay, we can do that, but we can't do that, but we can kind of do this, and then also, can you kind of collage the sky so the sky looks not like gray? So we talked about the colors in the sky. We talked about the colors of the city hall. I think even the text, there was different ideas of the text.
Yes, the text initially, because it was government, and I wanted to have it. We talked about putting it on the city hall building, having it read like a book page, and we had that done, and it sucked. It did not look good at all. And then who came up with the?
It was the idea of, so we did some samples in City Hall. We tried different fonts, and it just kind of looked really flat. And I think I told my assistant Gabby, who's in the picture right there, I was like, Gabby, can you do me a favor? Because a lot of the times, I like to show the artist a sample of how it could look, but more as a way, sorry, Consuelo, more as a way to kind of get you to do that. Like, this is how it'll look.
But it was a great idea. It was a great. There was no, like, you didn't have to push.
Yeah, so I was just getting Gabby to write it by hand and kind of going around the hand of the torch, because it was also kind of like, we have this hand figure. How do we really emphasize it's the Statue of Liberty torch, and having that quote, and just kind of really locking in to kind of like, look at this thing, focus your imagery on it, and kind of read the text, and you'd be like, oh, and then kind of draw you into the image. So that was kind of the idea, and I think color-wise it came out great. It was a CMYK. Sappho Graphics traditionally hasn't done a lot of CMYK. We've kind of come into it the past few years, but it's also a way to give other artists opportunities to kind of create prints who can't kind of create a drawing or something, but maybe it's a photographer or somebody who creates installations. How do we use that as a way to make a 2D print? But then also, you said you wanted to make it flat. But I think as a printmaker, I always want to make it not flat. So it's also like
Well, I mean,
combining those textures.
instead of, like an altar.
Yeah.
So we'll maybe take a look again, and maybe the two of you can reflect a little bit about the process of the development of the image and the uncovering of what ended up being the final print.
Yeah. I mean, I'll let Alvaro talk more about it. I think just the whole date, pandemic, it was really hot, and I think we had masks on. So I think the print studio we work in gets really hot, so I think it just brings back the heat and the mask and the sweat as we were trying to work through the print. But again, I have the fortune of being able to work with these artists and hearing the full story. So it's also like, I know these prints are packed with so much content, and just hearing everything, and just hearing Alvaro talk about it, I just want to hear Professor Marquez kind of go over, talk about it.
Well, I mean, I remember, I don't know if I was difficult to work with because I had my own ideas of what it should look like. And I was just trying to recruit Dewey to help me make it happen, if I'm honest with you. At the time, I've been working with this set of lino cut images for years now. I had developed them for my thesis project in grad school, and I'm still using them in my new mixed media pieces. Like, they've had a long life. And this was kind of like the first time that I moved into this like almost collage-like approach. So I have a background in printmaking, so I had pretty solid idea of what I wanted to do, and I was listening to Dewey's advice on how to execute it, because I had never printed something this large. I had definitely done complicated screen prints by myself, but I remember we had a lot of problem getting clean prints of the tents and the police cars, because the screen kept getting flooded, or the ink would dry on the screen, so we had to add ink extender so it wouldn't clog up there. And even then, if you look at the print, it's not as like tight as I would want it to be, but I'm okay with that. I basically use Rubylith, which is, I love it. It's old school. It's like the roots of serigraphy going back to the 70s.
Would you, for those who don't know?
Yeah, so Rubylith is a red UV film that creates like it's like a stencil where the light from the exposure unit doesn't go through, so you can create really nice, bold, clean shapes that you can then screen print onto the substrate. So all of the map forms are Rubylith, and then I also use some India ink to create some speckling, because if you know anything about serigraphy, you're printing layer upon layer upon layer. So the base layer is all Rubylith and India ink, and then the lino cuts, I digitize them with a scanner, and then we printed them out on a Mylar sheet as one layer digitally, and then the water is also, the base is Rubylith, but the waves are all just like India ink on Mylar. So I mean, personally, like my first love is lino cuts. My first project that I did with self-help was actually a lino cut series that I did from 2016 to 2017 in the Relief Studio. And when I went to grad school, I fell in love with screen printing, but I don't really have access to an exposure unit. It's really expensive to expose the screens and reclaim them and do all that. So I really wanted to go nuts with this print and really use the full potential of a screen print.
And as a printmaker, can you reflect on what it means to work with somebody else inside of a studio?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I love about printmaking in general, it's a very collaborative art form, because even when you're using facilities, you're sharing space with other artists. Whereas somebody, say, who paints, they might be a recluse in their studio working by themselves. I think printmaking is inherently very collaborative. So it was a very natural thing. And I mean, I owe a lot of credit to Dewey. He's very humble, but I used to sell my lino cut prints in random little like art fairs before I knew really anything. And Dewey happened to sell his t-shirts there because he makes really amazing t-shirts. And he was the one that said, hey, you should come into self-help. You're into this printmaking. And I mean, honestly, when he invited me, I was super intimidated. I had no formal art training. I had learned printmaking from watching YouTube videos. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just experimenting and having fun. I fell in love with it. And so I owe Dewey a lot of credit for inviting me into this space, and then self-help embraced me. And I can honestly say most of the opportunities I've had in my art career somehow extended from self-help. So it's been a really formative place for me.
Were you familiar with the organization before working there?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a mainstay of the Chicana Chicano art world. So that's why I was so intimidated to step foot in there, because when I think of self-help, I think of all these legendary artists who have been like a key part of the Chicana Chicano art scene. So it was very intimidating stepping in there. But I think that's one of the things, that I appreciate about self-help, and I'm always singing their praises, because I think part of their mission is to make sure that people like me have an opportunity to get those skills, to have the facilities, to be treated like a real artist, and then you start seeing yourself as an artist. And I think that's the powerful thing, and especially when you come up from a historically marginalized background, even though LA is very Mexican, it is still very exclusionary if you're a person of color in the art world. And so to have a space like self-help really allowed me to see myself as an artist, to take myself seriously. And so that's why now as a funder, I do everything I can to help self-help, because they did so much for my career.
I think something I've come to understand about self-help graphics, but also a lot of the folks that I've been collaborating with on this project, is that there's a deep respect now for a long legacy and the kind of persistence and the commitment, and there's a real desire to uphold and honor that through supporting people at various stages of their career, folks who have the longest kind of connection, and then bringing people into the fold to seeing it as a kind of simultaneous kind of propelling or sustaining the commitment. This politics and this commitment to art and politics has to be kind of kept alive through an intergenerational dialogue. And I think we're starting to hear that happen back and forth. And that's why I kind of wanted to put a point on it too, right? Because it's once you start seeing yourself in that, it kind of, I'm sure, takes on this really deep meaning.
Yeah, but I think that intergenerational element is really important. Like the first time, I had been making art since I could pick up a pencil as a child, but I never exhibited because I was very insecure, I was very scared. The very first time I ever exhibited any print, any artwork was in 2013 for the Day of the Dead exhibit, where I did a series honoring Jose Guadalupe Posada. And that was the first time I ever exhibited anywhere. And it was at Self-Help. It was with Daniel Gonzalez. He was the curator of the year. He had done an amazing print that had like cutout shapes. He's a very talented printmaker. If you don't know him, you should. And so he curated me into the exhibit because I was part of a collective that didn't last very long, but we made some cool things. And that's really what started off my whole trajectory as an artist.
That is what Alvaro said about it was his first opportunity and then he thought of himself as an artist. That is exactly why Sister Karen created the print studio. And she wanted quality paper, she wanted quality paints, she wanted everything to be as quality as possible, because she wanted there to be longevity for these prints. She wanted them to be exhibited. She wanted Chicano artists from the community to have the opportunity to call themselves artists. And so it was very important to her. She knew what she was doing when she opened that print studio. She knew that Chicano artists from, the community would not have opportunities to exhibit on the West Side. It is very exclusionary. The art world, just as a whole, any medium, is very exclusionary. And so she created this this art studio in East LA, in everyone's backyard. So they had the opportunity. She brought in master printers, and she had them teach what the community didn't know. And so for this to be, I keep thinking about what Sister Karen, how she would feel. And even the reconstruction, the owning of the building, all of that, for her to have started this in her backyard, in her garage, to have it be having prints all over the world, and having 50 years later this exhibit, it's just really remarkable. I think she would really be happy. She would be thrilled.
Well, it's been an honor to be a steward of this legacy in even just a small way. You know, I think for me, in bringing all these folks together is not just about this idea of political voice in print, but also a kind of self-propelled, self-owned, like a sense of advocacy for the issues.
Absolutely.
And creating a space where that can be really highlighted. And I'm gonna return to, we had a very lovely program in Philadelphia, and I asked the same question tonight that I asked then, and that the second related program is, you know, the exhibition title is called America Today, in some part because it's to mark the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, which is a conversation that's happening across Philadelphia about a kind of historical long view of a kind of the politics of our nation. And for me, in the work that we do at the Print Center, it's about putting artists' voice first as the folks who are are able to observe in real time the issues, the concerns that we have today as a kind of dialogue with the past in the context of the city. But for me, I was, as I've expressed, I had a lot of insecurity and unsteadiness and unsureness about titling a show America Today with all of the weight of what America has been, is, and the ways in which in and of itself is, right, a political construct that excludes and includes, that creates hierarchy and ultimately creates a lot of destruction. But I think in that, it also held great potential for a show like this to offer counterpoints. And so what are your estimations about what it means to be in an exhibition called America Today?
Well, I mean, I think, not to be a party pooper, America's an invention, right? Like it didn't exist before Europeans got here. Like the very term America has been colonized by the United States, because my friends in Mexico are always like, we're Americans too. People in South America, like, we're part of America too. And I'm in grad school right now, and my professor kind of like problematized that even further and was like, well, even the word America itself is a violent term that connotes indigenous genocide, slavery, economic hierarchies, and not to be a downer here, but it's like, I think of that word and I think of violence, I think of exclusion, I think of erasure, I think of genocide, and especially in the context of Los Angeles, right? Terminology is very important, it's very political, right? Los Angeles was not mapped until 1769, mapped by the Europeans, 1769, by the Portola expedition. Before that, this was known as Tavangar by Tongva people. So I always say that I live in Tavangar, I operate in Tavangar. And even the word Tavangar is not how we understand space, right? The term Tavangar incorporates a relational set of ecosystem between the natural world, between humans, where it's not a separation between a human being and the natural world. It connotes a very different set of relations, right? And I think of, you know, the Aztecs called it Anahuac, in South America of Tahuantinsuyu, right? These names matter. And so when I think of an exhibit like America Today, I'm really glad that you're problematizing these different viewpoints, because the very word, especially in this political moment that we live in, it's like I don't I don't take that term lightly.
I'm going to be, I guess, not as political, but I'm not going to necessarily not be a downer. Because I think America today, I think we will get through what we are living right now. I mean, when I lived through the 60s, I didn't think we were going to live through the 60s, but I was a child. So I think we're going to get through this period of time, but it is really horrible. America today is not, it's not the place that even 6 years ago, it was better than what it is now. And that's not saying much. But I do think that there is hope. I think artists can absolutely make a difference. I think we are. I think that this particular exhibit, I like the way the title it looks, because I think that there is something wrong with America, and I think it's very emblematic of we're askew. This country is askew, and there's no doubt about it. And I was telling my husband that I just don't understand how people can't. There are certain segments of our society that just still can't see it. They're starting to, but the fact that we have to go so far into the brink is really America today.
I just want to thank you, Lauren, and the Print Center for putting this together in a time when it was very necessary to be put together, when lots of folks were not doing anything like this, or having the courage to kind of convene these mission-based print shops who have a lot of stuff to say about America, and then just letting us say it. And I think that's really important, is just to give the artists a voice to say what they want to say, and for us to support them and kind of uplift them. So definitely, we thank you. And just thinking about like legacies of print shops, I mean, you talked about Sister Karen. She would have been stoked to have print and exhibit with Brandywine Studios, and
Yes.
And the founders were contemporaries and went to school together. So it's kind of all this small world of printmakers. We all know each other. We all talk crap about each other. We all support each other, and I feel like that's the very important thing that happens. Thank you.
Sure. I offer one kind of observation, is that the work in the exhibition is, some of it is quite biting, and reveals travesty, injustice, death, and some of it is oblique, it's abstract, it's about the experience of feeling what it means to be a person in space. Some of it is futuristic, offering alternative views of what it means to kind of envision a future that's not actually based in what we see in front of us, but it speculates on bringing knowledge from the past into the present. And when we were all together for the opening, the most number of people who had been in that space together on the exhibition opening, I think people were really, when the artists were speaking, when the shop folks were speaking, there was an acknowledgement that some of the work was tough, but it kind of being in that space and acknowledging that together, the kind of challenge of legacy, of violence, the kind of optimism that we hope to have one day again, that at least having that kind of time in that feeling together the time we get to share together, talking and reflecting about translating politics into art, it was needed and continues to be, and staring at the pictures that hold the worst of us back at us. Consuelo, your print has impacted so many of the folks that I take on through the show. There's something really, people are drawn in by the kind of majesty of the color, but then when they understand what they're looking at, there is a deep sadness that comes over them. And I actually do, it's funny that the two of you, and similarly, Alvaro, like people are drawn in, they see this juxtaposition, they see this iconography that is so resonant, but there becomes this secondary question, and it pulls people right into the kind of messaging, whether they kind of pull the deepness of the kind of local resonance or not. And that's the kind of full spectrum of what we were trying to provide. In some ways, it's a kind of relay of politics. It is not politics, but it's the relay. It's the kind of way these prints can move through space, and to have your works both in it, and to have facilitators like Self-Help Graphics who really sustain this ongoing commitment to ensuring that there are places for prints like this that can be made, which is really the commitment that all the folks, all the shops and the shows have, which is rare. Like these are the folks who are really ensuring that we stare the reality of our lived experiences straight forward, and that it's, create these mirrors for everybody else. So I'm grateful. We're gonna see if there are any questions from the audience. And
Alyssa.
there isn't.
You said you had questions. What was that?
I can get us started off. Do I just speak? Yeah. From like this wonderful conversation, thank you for all being here today. Oh, thank you so much. I was wondering.
You don't have to do anything.
Oh, it's on? Okay. Yeah, I just kind of am gathering. Alvaro, I really like your print. I'm also a person who's like very invested in history. I'm also trained in history. And kind of just how you think, as well as Consuelo. I think what's going on right now at the border has been going on for centuries and centuries is a humanitarian crisis, and I think that really needs to be thought about more. Especially, I come from Arizona. I come from very close to the Sonoran Desert, where it's basically like a grave to a lot of people and children as well. And I'm kind of gathering this idea of like stewardship, but also how land is thought of. America is, as you say, like an invention, an experiment, I would even add. Kind of thinking, oh, we're like a land of immigrants, but what does that mean for everyone? And how can artists take that idea that was kind of brought together, almost 250 years ago, and how it's changed so much based on who can say who is an immigrant, who makes those rules, and etc. So I kind of wanted to know how you think of land in a way. So how does like your everyday ideas of like land go into your creation of art? Is there any specific things that you think of even happening with the border, etc.? I guess it's kind of just like a vague question, but I think it's something to get a conversation started, I would say.
I have a lot to say about that. I think about land a lot. That's why, I've done installations where I use soil from my hometown. The map is a reference to land, to the objectification of land as a commodity, right? So one of the things I always try to learn from is our indigenous neighbors. And there's this amazing, I would challenge the term immigrant, right? Because some people were brought here forcibly, not of their own choosing. And then a lot of people were brought here not because they wanted to, but because of circumstances, right? So I think it's really, there's a nuance there. And there's this amazing Tongva Agjachiman scholar named Charles Sepulveda. And he has this, I'm a nerd, so I'm going to nerd out here. He's got this article called Our Sacred Waters. And he introduces the term kuyam. And kuyam is an indigenous term for guest. And that's how I think about my relationship to the land. I'm a guest here, right? Like I come from 3 generations of immigrants that were brought here for economic reasons. And if you know about Mexican history, it's no accident that Mexicans had to migrate and be cheap labor in this country going back 100 years, right? So I think of myself as a guest in this land. And if I'm taking seriously to learn from my indigenous neighbors, it's like the land is sacred. And one of the most violent things that colonialism did is to get us to see it as a source of a commodity that we extract from, that we dominate, that we desecrate. And so like when I think about land, like I'm continually trying to think about what is my ethical relationship to the land and who are the stewards, because I think that's really what I want to focus on. Because if you think about issues like ecological devastation, even gentrification, homelessness, at the root of it is this disconnection that we have from the land. And it pervades so many things. It is a racialized hierarchy. And I think it's like, if we were to really like learn from our indigenous neighbors how to be in relationship, in reciprocity with the land, like that could completely radically alter our social relations.
As far as my view of land, as Alvaro is talking, I was remembering how when I was in my MFA program, my professor took us as a field trip to a house in it's not Atwater Village, it's up Hollywood Boulevard, right before Griffith Park. It's that area. Los Feliz, thank you. He took us on this field trip to Los Feliz, and it was a house that everything in the house was, the water was captured and used, the scraps for food were used, everything was used, was made into fertilizer, it was food was grown on the land, and everything was done. And I'm like, that's my mom. That's how I grew up. This is nothing new to me. We honored our land. That's how we grew up. We grew our crops on our land. We grew fruits. We grew everything. It was the way that we connected with it. And my mom would my dad. My mom grew flowers and fruit. My dad grew vegetables. And they would always tell me it's important for us to take care of the land. You can't just use it. You can't just use it. You have to give it fertilizer. You have to, give it water. You have to take care of it because the land is what we have. That's the only thing of value that we really have. Money is really, it's a construct. And so my relationship with land is that. And now, my children and now my grandchildren are learning to value the same thing.
Thanks, Alyssa. That was a great question. Alyssa is also our Getty Merrill intern, just to shout you out.
Any others?
This is a short question, but I think there was an acknowledgement from all of you that things seem bleak out there as we approach this 250th year of the U.S. But I want to hear what is giving you hope right now to you. Is there any glimmers?
At South Up, we work with lots of youth, and talking about generations of artists, I think we represent multi-generations of artists, but they give me hope. I think just seeing them in the space, working on stuff, doing things, getting dirty, making a mess, making me angry, that gives me hope. It gives me lots of hope that there's gonna be people in the future that will take on these traditions, because for me, Chicano printmaking is a tradition that was passed on to me. I didn't learn it at a school; it was passed on. So, I think for me, it's really important to think, who do I pass that to, and how do they pass that on for the next 7 generations? And really thinking about that. So yes, things are bleak, but there's also like moments of excitement and joy. I'm not I'm a total Debbie Downer when it comes to sports and FIFA and football, but I do appreciate the joy that people have in those things, and just the cultural joy that brings that out of them, and hopefully that'll push them to kind of think about things and push them to change in the neighborhood, or push them to be like, hey, we came together for this, can we come together for something else? Whatever that is, whether it's a carne asada or a political protest or just cleaning up the neighborhood. And those are the basic things that was passed on to me from my dad, is like, you might not be a millionaire, you can't change the world, but you could pick up the trash in front of the house. And you could tell somebody and pick up their trash. And that's how you do things on a small scale.
For me, it's not youth, but it's still young. It's my grandbabies. They bring me such joy, and they're multiracial, the 3 of them, and that brings me joy, because that is what I feel like our world should look like. Maybe not multiracial in one person, but definitely accepting. So when I see them, they're, you can even tell I just got light, because they are just so beautiful and so smart, and they are the best of us. They haven't been polluted yet. They are the best representation of humanity, and they are just everything to me.
I appreciate the question, Betsy. I have a hard time accessing joy right now. It's dark times.
Become a grandparent.
Well, I'm a parent, That's a source of joy, but I just want to be honest. It's really hard to feel joy right now. I used to be a news junkie. I can't. It's a constant barrage. And what I will say, again, I'm a downer, so I'm just going to say it. What we're going through right now is absolutely nothing new. This lays at the root. All we're seeing right now is a very naked expression of what this country has always been, even under democratic regimes. I'm going to say it. You know, it's really easy to think, oh, things were so much better under Obama. They were not. He deported. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Yeah, I think I saw numbers about 5 million people, right? And so, I mean, again, this is going to sound like a downer, but I feel like what gives me hope, because I'm not going to talk about joy. I can't feel joy right now. But what gives me hope is to know that for the last 250 years, people have fought the good fight, and there's been people in resistance creating other ways of being, other ways of relating to each other. And as somebody who is studying history, who's studying social movements, that's what gives me hope, is that, you know, like Consuelo was saying, the 60s, that was another tumultuous period, right? Political repression, assassinations. This country, this is nothing new, right? And if you think about the founding of this country, like this is just a naked expression of something that has always been. So if anything, it's just a very illuminating time where I see this like opportunity for people to see that naked truth in a way that sometimes it's easy to lie to ourselves about when there's a different administration in power.
Let me say, so we have to wind down, but let me say that hearing such stark perspectives, hearing the similarities of concern, but observations on impacts and influences and paths forward, that holding space for that, the kind of range coming out of personal experience and observations on a shared past is a lot of that kind of asynchronous or that kind of juxtaposition is what I've gotten to live, or I've got to observe through working on this project, is the kind of ways in which, and to the best of my ability, I tried the best I could to do exactly what we just heard now, but on a wall. And I can't say that it accomplishes the kind of advocacy that maybe people in organizing and doing can accomplish, but the least it can do is be that mirror, to kind of stand in, to hold a small space for those who need to and want to be surrounded by the art of it.
And start conversations. I mean, I think that what you said about people going in and looking at the exhibit and then looking further and more detailed, that starts conversations. It starts making people think outside of their own comfort bubble.
And it's small, and it's the most I can ask of people, because it's art, and in some ways,
Absolutely.
yeah. But I appreciate the kind of fullness that you all brought to this conversation, to reflecting on your experiences and the way in which you carry forward this real commitment to social justice, not just in a print that we have on view in Philadelphia, but to your lives in all of its fullness. I'm so grateful for everyone here today, to Self-Help for bringing me here. And we're going to close out with some words from Paulina.
So I think tonight, this represents the essence of self-help graphics. We talked about and mentioned Sister Karen. And Sister Karen, her garage was the very first home of self-help graphics and art. And along with a group of artists, they built this organization by coming together and creating art. And so for more than 50 years now, we've been taking the baton one generation after the next to finally come to a place where we'll have a space, a home that we steward, the land that our home will be on, in a way that honors our ancestors, that honors the intergenerational lessons that we've learned, that doesn't just look at the materials that our building has as things to throw away, but we will reuse them. And so I'm really proud to acknowledge all of the work of generations before me, and also share a really joyful moment that we hope that our home will be completed at the end of this year. We thank partners like the Los Angeles Public Library that have opened their doors to us to have programming while we've been in a renovated, in a space of renovation. So I just wanted to close out by thanking everyone who supports us, thanking you all for being here today to have this conversation, and thank you to the artists, thank you to Lauren and Dewey for just a really candid conversation, because I think this really represents the vision that was founded more than 50 years ago, to have a place to speak about art, to create art, and to really fight for social justice. So thank you for being here tonight.